Hi and welcome back to my channel. Now in this video I'd like to share with you my experience of the last 3 years of working with the Canon RF 400 f2.8 lens. The 400mm f2.8 is a lens designed for professional sports, action and wildlife, and is essential for low light demanding situations that require fast and bright aperture. So now we get to the really big guns. These lenses are quite honestly outrageous, but they don't get any better than this. This is a 400mm f2.8 fixed focal length lens. So what does that mean? That basically means that it's a telephoto prime lens, but also fixed focal length at 400mm, which means I can't zoom in and out. It's not a telephoto zoom like 100 to 500 or the 100 to 400 EF version. So that means you have to be really selective over the subjects that you're going to be shooting before you even decide to get this out of its case. They are also insanely expensive at around 12,000 US dollars brand new. If you're lucky, you might find one at around sort of 9 to 10,000 in sort of used conditions. And you might even be able to pick up an EF Mark III version for the same amount of money. This is the lens I use for professional sports. It produces ultra sharp, clean and bright images in the most extreme of situations. This lens is not cheap, as I mentioned, but if you want to be amongst the very best photographers, having 400mm at a constant aperture of f2.8 is kind of where you need to be. Now this is the RF version, but there's plenty of older EF versions on the market still in sort of used conditions. There's the EF Mark I, which is probably about 25 years old now. Got the Mark II, which is probably around sort of 10 to 15 years old, and the recently released Mark III version, which is only about sort of 5 to 6, maybe 7 years old. You could probably get the first generation, the EF Mark I version of this lens for about $2,000 to $4,000. Sounds relatively cheap compared to the brand new versions, but you have to bear in mind that these lenses are sort of 25 years old already. They're going to be in a reasonably bad condition visibly. There are going to be a lot of chips, marks, scuffs all over the lens. I would probably avoid buying these online because you have no idea what you're going to get. You need to do a proper eye examination because they've been used by working professionals for like 20, 25 years. I've seen quite a lot of people with Mark I versions of these lenses and they look like they're completely beaten up. So you need to be really careful. You have to check visibly for things like mold and fungus and dust within the sort of lens barrel. So you need to do a proper physical check before deciding to purchase one of these lenses, because even buying a Mark I or a Mark II is still a significant investment. It's going to work perfectly fine with the EF to RF adapters. There's no issues there, but even a Mark I lens that's 25 years old already is still a big investment for a lot of people. Other alternatives, there is literally no alternative to a 400mm f2.8. You could go longer at 500 or 600mm, but these are going to be f4 lenses. This is an f2.8, and they're also generally going to be a lot larger and probably a lot heavier. There is a Canon 400mm f4 DO version. These are quite old now, but probably would work perfectly fine with an EF to RF adapter. The DO range, which means diffractive optics, seemed like a bit of experiment by Canon, as they haven't really persevered with that type of lens technology since. There is also an EF 200 to 400mm f4 lens with the built-in 1.4 times teleconverter. This is a very popular lens for sports shooters with that 200 to 400mm focal range, plus an additional 1.4 times with a built-in teleconverter. Another option would be the brand new RF 100-300 f2.8. I could imagine a lot of 400mm 2.8 shooters opting to switch to that lens, especially with all the brand new kind of RF technologies built in and the autofocusing compatibilities and stuff like that. So I can see a lot of people switching. There's also some third-party lenses such as the Sigma 120 to 300 f2.8. And if you really want to stand out from the crowd, then why not get yourself a Sigma 200 to 500 f2.8. That is a thing of comedy in my opinion, but it does help to illustrate why the 400mm f2.8 is the perfect combination of focal distance and aperture. So I'm just going to give you a bit more information here. So it comes with a lens hood, which is pretty massive, I've got to be honest. So this just comes off like this. That just attaches on there like that. So without the camera fitted, it's roughly about that size with the lens hood on. Now you can get a shorter lens hood if that's beneficial, but that's another sort of $500-600, I think, to get the Canon branded one. I think there's maybe some third-party versions that you can get, but you can get a shorter lens hood. So when used in the field, that is pretty much roughly the size of the lens. So you also may have noticed that the lens foot is different to the one that you may have seen previously. This is the one that it ships with. Quite honestly, that thing is about as good as useless. You have to put a tripod plate on the bottom, which makes it even heavier, and it's extremely high profile as well. So by putting a new lens fit on, you're reducing the profile between the tripod mount and the lens, and it's just easier to use. Well, I find it's easier to use. So that would be my first recommendation, is actually to remove the lens foot and replace it with a third party. That's just more useful. Also, this third party is Arca Swiss compatible, so it's way more compatible with tripod mounts than compared to the original tripod foot, which you have to actually put an Arca Swiss plate underneath, which of course you're increasing weight and there's just more things to carry around, and quite honestly, I just got rid of it. Now this lens can be used with teleconverters. This is the 1.4 times teleconverter. So with the 1.4 times converter, this lens will be 560 millimeters at f4. It's pretty amazing to think that you can get 560 millimeters at an f4 aperture. That is pretty amazing, I've got to be honest. So with the 2 times converter, which I generally don't use myself, but that will turn this lens into 800 millimeters at f5.6. That is completely insane to think that you can get that much focal range from a lens that can be basically compacted down and transported in airline approved carry-on luggage. That's completely insane. As I mentioned, this is my primary lens for pro level sports, as it just delivers exceptional results wide open at f2.8. But even then, I don't mind shooting at f4, as this gives even sharper results. But if the light is challenging, then it's f2.8 all the way. However, I'm usually finding that I'm having to crop in quite a lot on my subject because of the 400mm fixed focal length. That's really the only drawback I can think of, other than the size and weight while traveling. Expect to have to make some serious compromises when buying this type of lens. I mean, it's like buying a car. You're gonna have to think about insurance, you're gonna have to think about maintenance, you're gonna have to think about where you're gonna store it to keep it dry and moisture free. When the lens is not in use, I place it in this sort of hard shell storage case. So when I've finished working with the lens, the dust caps go back on and it goes straight back into that case, which is full of silicone gel to help keep it dry and moisture free. You also may have noticed that I bought this neoprene cover to help protect the lens, and you can see already that it's beginning to get really dirty. So it's doing its job. But I could just take this off and then you'll see that it's the real lens underneath. Let's just take the lens hood off as well, so we can see the lens a little bit better there. So there we are. That is it. And like I mentioned earlier, it's quite heavy. I mean, I can hold this in one hand maybe for about 2 minutes. That's literally about it. So this is about 3 kilos in weight. Significantly lighter, I have to say, than the EF Mark 1, Mark 2. There is some definite improvements when it comes to weight and the overall portability of this lens. So generally, this is how the lens would be when I'm shooting kind of sports photography. I'd have the neoprene cover on, and I've got the lens hood to also protect it. But when I'm shooting wildlife, or if I'm doing safari trips, then I also bought this sort of camouflage neoprene cover. And that works really well to try and hide the sort of glare of the white lens, and it also keeps it kind of mark and scratch free, and also stops it from getting really dirty, because safari, you'll notice that there's a lot of dust in the air, so these lenses can get beaten up pretty quickly. So I generally like to protect the lens with this type of thing. Now, when I bought the lens, it did originally ship with this very nice camera case. Now, originally in the Mark 1, Mark 2 versions, it was like a hard case, but now it's this sort of kind of soft case instead, which makes it a little bit easier to carry around, and it's extremely light as well. But I've got to be honest, I didn't find this to be very useful at all. So I bought 2 other bags to help transport this lens around. I have this bag, which I use most of the time, which is made by Neewer, and this is a sort of airport style roller luggage case. This is unbelievably useful because it allows me to move around really quickly. So I use this when I'm working at stadiums and things like that, because I can just put all the gear in here and I can just take it with me pretty much anywhere, and it makes working and moving around much, much easier and quicker. So the 400mm lens kind of fits right in the middle, and it can be even attached to a camera and it will still fit, and also with the lens hood as well. So this bag is big enough to accommodate all of that, and also at least 2 other cameras and lenses, and also all the additional items that you need, such as memory card readers and who knows what else, extra batteries and memory cards and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, this bag, unbelievably useful. I also have this Lowepro Pro Trekker BP 550 bag, which is a backpack. Not as big as the Neewer roller case, but still pretty useful if you're doing trekking, hiking, safari trips and stuff like that. So this is a bit more of a squeeze. The 400mm lens will fit inside this bag, but without a camera attached to it. And also, I can't fit the lens hood in, so the lens hood has to be transported separately, which is a bit awkward. But anyway, this bag comes with loads of pockets, loads of compartments. It's a really amazing bag. It's great for if you're doing hiking, trekking, safari trips and doing kind of more wildlife work. So basically the roller, like the airport style roller case, is the one I would use for sort of day-to-day work, because it's so much easier to carry all this gear around. If I'm doing a trek or a hike, safari trips, that type of stuff, this is probably the bag that I would use, because it has this amazing lumbar support as well built in. So you can carry probably 10 to 15 kilos on your back really comfortably. So basically both bags, really good investments, a lot more functional and practical than the case that the camera came with originally. It's not one that I really would recommend using, I've got to be honest. Invest in a really good bag that's going to make your life a lot easier. It's also worth bearing in mind that all those bags are airline approved carry-on luggage, so no issues with getting those bags on board an aircraft. You just have to worry about the weight. It's an extremely high maintenance piece of gear, as I mentioned, but I've got to be honest, it's probably worth it when you look back over your work and you realize what you can actually achieve with f2.8 at 400mm. For me, it's been an absolutely fantastic lens to use for a number of subjects in challenging lighting conditions. It's been great for safari and wildlife trips, but mostly it's been an absolute workhorse for professional sports. So that's my review of almost 3 years of working with the Canon RF 400mm f2.8. And I've got to be honest, it's been an absolutely fantastic journey so far. And I really hope to be using this for many, many more years to come. Thank you so much for viewing this video. I hope it's been beneficial in some way, especially if you're thinking about moving to the Canon R mount. And also if you're thinking about purchasing one of the EF Mark 1 or Mark 2 lenses, you don't have to go all out and spend all that money on the RF version. The EF Mark 1 and Mark 2 versions will work perfectly fine with the EF to RF adapter. So hopefully this video provides a little bit of information from my experience of working with this lens. Please don't forget to like, share and subscribe, and stay tuned for more videos.